Good morning to all present today. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome you to the International Scientific Conference, Contemporary Challenges of Economic Growth and Sustainability of Businesses. The conference is organized by the Institute of Economics, Skopje, as a part of its 70th anniversary. Today, we will have 3 parallel sessions. Before we start with the first panel of the first session, I would like to share with you the opening speech of the director of the Institute of Economics, Professor Zoran Janevski, and now the video will be shared.
Of economic.
Неќе, ја го уклучив тоа што треба да.
Dear rector, dear professors, researchers, dear students, colleagues, I would say dear friends. It is indeed my pleasure to welcome you at this International Scientific Conference on Contemporary Challenges of Economic Growth and Sustainability of Businesses. The conference is organized by the Institute of Economics Skopje, which is an integral unit of the St. Cyril and Methodius University in Skopje, the largest, the oldest, and the best-ranking university in North Macedonia. My name is Zoran Janevski, and I'm a professor at the Institute of Economics and director of the Institute. The Institute of Economics Skopje was founded in 1952, and this year it celebrates 70 years of its existence. During these 70 years, the Institute has been an active participant in almost all significant economic challenges faced by the country and the world. For the last 7 decades, the Institute has been continuously developing its leading role in the country in the field of higher education and research, conducting master's and PhD studies in several study programs in the fields of economics and organizational sciences and management. More than 1,000 students have obtained a master's degree and more than 170 candidates have successfully defended their doctoral thesis at the Institute of Economics Skopje. During its existence, the Institute has developed and realized more than 500 research projects and has published more than 180 special publications. In the last 24 years, a scientific journal of the Institute called Economic Development has been published. The journal has an international editorial board and it is indexed in several databases and repositories. This conference is part of our anniversary celebration and it is dedicated to the economic growth and sustainability of businesses. This year, we are almost 120 participants, and we are very happy about it, and I would like to welcome all of you. You come from 5 different countries, and today we are going to listen to 50 presentations on economics and business-related research works. The program is organized in 3 parallel sessions, online on the Microsoft Teams platform. This means that you cannot listen to all the presentations, but after we stop with our opening speeches, you should stay online just where you are right now, and you will participate in 1 session at a time. Why we choose this specific name for our conference? The world is facing many global challenges in the last years. First, the COVID pandemic. It turned our lives and economies upside down, and I'm afraid it is still not over. Second, the war crisis in Ukraine. The economic consequences from this crisis spread fast and far, hitting hardest the world's most vulnerable people. Hundreds of millions of people were already struggling with lower incomes and higher energy and food prices, and this war has made this much worse. Third, for the first time in many years, inflation has become a clear danger for many countries around the world. In economic terms, growth is down and inflation is up. Macroeconomic imbalances have reached unprecedented proportions. The world is facing growing income inequality across and within countries. All this and many other issues play the essential, the most crucial role in the global economy. And we, at the Institute of Economics Skopje, are confident that it is already the critical moment to start working together, to discuss these issues, to share our research findings and results, to exchange our views and increase our efforts to make our choices and to identify solutions. I wish you a fruitful debate, courageous but argumentative and fact-based, and I'm convinced that it will lead to concluding observations and recommendations that will help to improve the situation related to the economic growth and sustainable businesses. Thank you.
Thanks to the director welcome speech, and now follows the rector and his welcome remarks for the conference. Our rector of St. Cyril and Methodius is Professor Nikola Jankulovsky.
Of the Institute of Economics Skopje, Professor Zoran Janevski, dear scholars, researchers, colleagues. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the international conference, Contemporary Challenges of Economic Growth and Sustainability of Businesses. This conference is organized as part of the 70th anniversary celebration of the Institute of Economics, Skopje, St. Cyril and Methodius University in Skopje. Since its beginnings, the Institute of Economics has positioned itself as a significant factor in development of the economic thought in the country. In the complex and dynamic environment that imposes ever higher standards in the process of research and acquisition of knowledge and skills, the Institute of Economics paves its way to success by implementing a significant number of scientific and applied projects and supporting the creation of economic policies. Much of the Institute's value lies in its long-standing commitment to enhance education and science as a driving force of economic and social development. Over the past 7 decades, the Institute has achieved respectable development on a wider scale. This is a result of the high professionalism and consistency in the mission of the Institute, but also of the commitment and the efforts of its management and employees through the years. Numerous scientific research projects have been prepared with other education and research centers from Europe and the world, with which the Institute of Economics cooperates in tackling scientific issues and knowledge transfer. Universities in modern societies cover wide areas of activities exploring the concepts, trends, and ideas that define the expectations of science and higher education. St. Cyril and Methodius University has always actively supported the efforts for scientific breakthroughs and their application in education, business, and the society. Today, more than ever before, science has the power to change the world we live in and to shape the future. Science and its application in education and businesses is the basis on which economic benefits are created for both companies and the society. In these trying times, the world is facing numerous challenges with unforeseeable consequences and implications in all aspects of human's life. Faced with sharp eradication of economic growth, energy crisis, surging inflation, sluggish investments, as well as disrupted supply chains, among others, economies are struggling to introduce policies in an attempt to elevate the implications of this crisis and set solid grounds for revitalization of the economy and businesses. Fostering economic growth and creating favorable businesses environment is probably one of today's most important challenges for the humanity. Having said the above, this conference brings together scholars and researchers with an aim to discuss the ongoing challenges of economic growth and sustainability of businesses. In these new circumstances, there is an indisputable need to use all available resources to create policies and well-designed structural reforms aimed at mitigating the adverse changes and expected implications in short and medium term so as to build the foundations for future prosperity. It gives me a great pleasure to see that a significant number of speakers shall present their research and insights at this conference. More than 50 papers will be presented in 3 parallel sessions covering various aspects pertaining to the economic growth, macroeconomic and sectoral policies, as well as critical business issues. I wish all participants at the conference fruitful discussions while sharing their insights and much cooperation in the future as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the rector's welcome speech. So we are now on the first panel of the first session, titled as Determinants of Economic Growth, Current Situation and Prospects. Good morning once again to all participants and welcome to the first panel. Let me introduce myself at first. My name is Neda Petrovska-Angilovska, and it will be my honor to moderate this panel. We have, according to the agenda, 5 papers for presentation on this panel, and for each of it, 10 minutes for presenting. I will kindly ask all participants who will present their papers to take care of the scheduled time so we can then have enough time for discussions or questions after all presentations. All participants will be allowed to take a part in the discussion by raising a digital hand or writing in the chat. Also, I should inform you that the whole session will be recorded. Now, let's start with the first presenter, our colleague from Belgrade, Milena Lazic. She will present the research regarding the macroeconomic performance of Western Balkan countries, an empirical investigation. The paper is made by Darko Marjanovic and Milena Lazic. Please, Milena, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Before I start, I just have one question. Should I share the screen and present?
Yes.
Or you will?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Share
Then just a sec.
your presentation, Milena.
Okay. I hope that you see my presentation.
Yes.
Okay. Let me just do.
Welcome.
Thank you. Just a sec, sorry. Okay. So I hope that now is fine. Okay, once again, hello everyone. And first of all, I would like to greet you all. Thank you for this great opportunity to present the work that I prepared with my senior colleague, Darko Marjanovic. I hope that soon enough we will have the chance to exchange our ideas in person. But before that happens, we need to adapt to the current conditions. Considering the time limitation, I arranged my presentation in a way that I will firstly present a brief, but very brief, background of a situation in the Western Balkans since the beginning of the 21st century, but the focus will be on the impact of a pandemic. I will then present some statistics, bring a discussion, and finally conclude. As I mentioned, the beginning of the 21st century was dominated by significant events that reshaped the Western Balkans region in a political and social way. The period was characterized by political stabilization and renewal of the transition process, which resulted in economic growth and development of the region. During this period, the Western Balkan countries based their economic growth on accelerated domestic consumption and consequently real wages. Nevertheless, the global financial crisis dramatically affected the region. Even though the crisis began in 2007, the Western Balkan felt the crisis adverse effects at the end of 2008, when institutional investors started to withdraw their funds, which profoundly impacted the level of foreign currency savings. And furthermore, the global financial crisis caused a decline in imports, a balance of payments deficit, and reduced FDI inflows, which further affected the macroeconomic stability of the region. The economic recovery began in 2010, and the main result was just a moderate economic growth in almost all Western Balkan countries. The positive economic trends were abruptly interrupted in early 2020 by the COVID-19 influence crisis, and unlike previous economic crises, this crisis is not caused by an economic factor, which makes it very difficult to compare to something similar in the past. The COVID-19 just caused a global slowdown in trade and economic activity, with health and other pandemic costs rising sharply. This is somehow common knowledge, and the results of recent analysis indicated the COVID-19 pandemic has generated the worst world economic recession since the Great Depression. The fact is that it directly affected the real economy when it comes to both aggregate supply and aggregate demand. Considering the scope of this research, as I mentioned, which should emphasize that the COVID-19 pandemic has caused huge disruption in the economic activity of all observed Western Balkan countries, which were already lagging behind in terms of economic convergence to the European Union. And the aim of this brief presentation would be to evaluate the economic impact of the crisis on key macroeconomic variables such as GDP, public debt, fiscal balance, and unemployment in Western Balkan countries. In addition, we pointed out the main challenges that the economies of these countries will face in the future, and given that in some way the COVID-19 pandemic is still present and that we have the ongoing political situation in the European continent, we believe that at this point of time it is still early to apply a quantitative approach in the analysis. So we use some descriptive statistics, and our research was based on descriptive analysis of secondary data from the World Bank database. And now I will present some statistics as I mentioned. I hope that before that, I hope that at the end of this presentation, we will answer two questions, which we isolate in a way. The first one is, what are the economic effects of the COVID-19 on Western Balkan countries, and what are the main risks facing the Western Balkan economies? So at this graph, we see the GDP growth in Western Balkan countries, selected ones. From the following graph, we can see that the COVID-19 crisis hit Montenegro the hardest, as it can be see here, and the GDP decline recorded in 2020 was 15.2%. The main reason for such a large decline is the high dependence of this country's economy on service activities, primarily tourism, since we all know that that is a main activity, one of the main activities in this country. Other observed countries did relatively well in the crisis, primarily Serbia, which in 2020 recorded a decline of GDP of just 1%. What we should bear in mind, nevertheless, is that common to all countries that recorded lower GDP decline in this crisis is the fact that the structures of their economies had a small share of service activities, because we all know that the sector that was hit most was just service industry, considering the type and characteristics of a crisis. When it comes to fiscal balance, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the governments of the observed countries implemented strong monetary and fiscal support to limit the adverse impact of the crisis on economic growth. Such support, together with a decline in the collection of fiscal revenues as a result of the economic activity slowdown, has led to an increase in the fiscal deficit and public debt in all observed countries. The largest fiscal deficits in 2020 were recorded in Montenegro, as can be seen here, 11% of GDP, North Macedonia 8.2% of GDP, and Serbia 8.1% of GDP. The opposite side of a coin, if I can express myself in that way, is that with the growth of the fiscal deficit, the need for falling into greater debt grows sharply as the COVID-19 disease actually spread. All observed Western Balkan countries in 2020 recorded an increase in the share of public debt in GDP. Montenegro about 28.6%, Albania 11.4%, and North Macedonia 11.4% recorded the highest growth of debt to GDP ratio. And considering the other Western Balkan countries, the share of public debt in GDP in Serbia increased by 4%, while in Bosnia and Herzegovina grew by 4.6%. When it comes to discretionary fiscal response observed by country, different fiscal and monetary policy measures were taken, as it is already well known. Their shaping was influenced primarily by the fiscal space that the governments of the observed countries had at their disposal, and the possibilities of using monetary policy instruments and monetary policy stimuli. The economic assistance package in the Western Balkan countries consisted of a combination of short-term crisis mitigation measures, the provision of some kind of a subsidized loans to firms, the introduction of tax reductions or deferrals of loan repayments, or the subsidization of wages for affected firms. In addition to these measures, trade ones were created with the aim of banning the export of medical equipment or food products. These are, again, some facts that are well known. Regardless of the type of measures chosen, all Western Balkan countries exceeded their planned fiscal results and projected pre-pandemic public debt levels. Montenegro and Serbia were in the lead, which is some kind of a characteristic. And when it comes to the labor market and unemployment rates, the slowdown in economic activity also affected the labor market, which is somehow expected. As it can be seen from the graph below, of the observed countries, only North Macedonia in 2020 recorded a decrease in the unemployment rate.
Please,
sorry.
can you note the timing of your presentation?
Okay, I will just bring a brief discussion. Sorry. Okay, so a brief discussion will be, and I will just stick to these slides.
Yes.
The economic measures taken to alleviate the crisis have stimulated economic growth and reduced unemployment, but also the growth of public and budget deficits in all observed Western Balkan countries, as it was seen from the graphs presented. The main challenges for future growth and development lie primarily in the duration of the COVID-19 pandemic, and I will add here the current situation, considering in the first place raising inflation. The long-term sustainability of economic recovery requires the implementation of structural reforms aimed at boosting productivity growth. And in conclusion, just again, the crisis caused by the spread of the COVID-19 has had a strong impact on the economies of the Western Balkan countries due to the simultaneous shock which occurred to both supply and demand. There was a drop in GDP and increase in unemployment, and strong fiscal and monetary stimuli have mitigated these negative effects, but also burden public debt and the budget. That can be a problem because we can expect that the rising interest rates, which will be problematic in future, and short-term measures to mitigate the negative effects of the crisis are very expensive and unstable